Welcome to Who's Your Mama, a podcast focusing on tomorrow's future, which are our kids, educators, teachers, parents, all encompassing with the goal of understanding that our brain is a muscle that we can exercise to control the speed in the direction that we want. Let's go, y'all. The time is now. Duchess Cerraeh Laykin, welcome to Who's Your Mama?
Hello, Michelle. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Well, I'm excited to have you on here as well. So many people know you as Duchess. Sometimes as the saying goes, jack of all trades, good at nothing. Creatively speaking, jack of all trades, good at so many things, especially creatively thinking. And so you've really had quite the journey, and I'm excited for you to share your journey from both a personal and professional artistic standpoint. You motivate so many people, and so we are ready to go on the journey with you. So I will turn it over to you.
I guess I've always been a creative person. I grew up in a family of very talented creative artists, and I didn't really realize that until later on. So things like drawing and dressing myself up and just being self-expressed came very naturally to me. And that's sort of, I remember as a child, I was always drawing beautiful pictures of women's dresses and gowns and Cinderellas and, all that stuff. And I always fantasized about being a fashion designer since as long as I can remember. I remember at 5 years old, I was drawing beautiful gowns and princesses. I was like, oh, I want to do this when I grow up, costume or fashion. And I always loved to play dress up and run around the neighborhood, run around the house playing dress up.
Was there something in someone's that influenced you for specifically how you started expressing yourself that way at the beginning?
As I can remember, my Aunt Sylvia, who's also an artist, and my grandmother, I think those two were the most influential on me, as a little child playing dress up. Also my mom. But my aunt used to bring over these giant bags of clothes, and she had fabulous clothes. And she would give me and my cousin, her daughter, these bags of clothes to play dress up with every year for Christmas. And we would just go to town and just, put everything on and run around. And my grandmother, I just remember her and her turbans. She had this like 1920s vibe. And I, as a child, was wearing turbans since as long as I can remember as well. So I like the glamorous look with the long cigarette holder and these gowns and these turbans and feeling fabulous.
How old were you when the memories that you're describing right
Oh,
now?
I'm talking my earliest memories, 5, 6, 7 years old.
Right.
Putting
because
makeup on.
Whoever they are, talk about between as kids, which is again part of the motivation of Who's Your Mama, setting things in earlier in life in your mind to have life skills. Is 5 to 7 is really formidable times.
Super important time. Yeah, that's very formidable. I would say, like, because of those influences when I was at that age, I mean, that kind of set the path for me. I've always been, into fashion, styling, self-expression. I did grow up in a rather strict household, so I wasn't allowed to really be very self-expressed in other areas of my life, like my room or even the way I dressed when I went out in the real world. So I had to play a lot on my own and find my own creativity. But yeah, those years I think were just so very influential. And I
If
just
I may,
remember,
when you say so, if I'm understanding, because I think a lot of people will really resonate with what I just heard, it was you could be creative and just throw so many things on and be free, yet in your room, things had to be in order. So it gave you that kind of creative freedom.
Yeah, it
Is
was
that
it was my first creative outlet, let's say. Um, like I said, my mom was pretty strict with me. I wasn't allowed to wear makeup, or I wasn't allowed to wear what I wanted to wear when we went out together, or like, just out in the real world. So I had to just like play on my own, and sometimes sneak out of the house and put my makeup on later. you know.
which we're not condoning, by the way, but we are
Well, re-
we are encouraging creative freedom. But you do, like, that's part of what the outlets are. If you can't express yourself at home, what's your
yeah,
environment like?
you
Why are
find
you doing
ways.
what you're doing?
Children will always find ways to express themselves. Some kids
Yeah.
do it through drawing. I also was doing a lot of drawing, or writing, or making things, or knitting, or making jewelry, or ceramics, whatever it is. I mean, find your thing and just be creative, and you know be you, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, but just be yourself. Um, but yeah, so I also grew up in a family of photographers, amateur photographers. But my father was avidly taking pictures of every moment, all the things, all the time, movies with those old Super 8 and 16 millimeter cameras. And I didn't realize till later that that little shutter bug in him really did affect the rest of us in the family. We all became shutterbugs. So we all took a lot of pictures all the time. So later in life, I ended up becoming a photographer as well.
You do
So,
take some great pictures.
yeah, thank you. But going back to the fashion stuff, like, I said to myself when I was a child, 7, 8 years old, like, I want to be a fashion designer when I grow up. And I want to be an astronaut. Hell, I want to be the first fashion designer in space. That's what I said to my diary and to my friends. And sure
Wow.
enough, as the years went on, I did become a fashion designer. And I love astronomy. I still am an avid pursuer of astronomy. And you never know. Maybe I will be in outer space one day. Because these days you can do that, right? Right?
Absolutely. I mean, aim high. And I think there's so many different things in what you said in terms of that is inspirational, aim high, manifestation, think outside the box.
And write down things that you really want, especially when you're young. Write it down in your journal, your diary, and look at it later in life, and you'll realize you'll probably have actually manifested everything that you wanted, because so far I have. Almost everything that I wrote in my diaries has come to fruition.
And you feel like when you go back and you look at that, which leads me to another question. How often do you go back and how far back in time do you go? Is there
I
any
mean,
sort of
I do
method
still
to?
have all my old diaries, and every, once in a blue moon, I'll go back and open one up, and I'll think, oh, that's funny. I wrote that down then. Well, it came true. So
It's
it's
just when
been fun.
you're thinking, is there something that, and I say this because I think there's a flip of the coin in my head in life. So, trigger versus spark or sparkle. So is there something that triggers or sparks a memory that makes you go back to look, or encourages you, I should say, right? It's
No,
just,
no. It's just sometimes you want to trip down memory lane and open up an old book and read it. I
yeah.
just happen to do that. Not everybody saves their diaries, but I do. And I think it's just fun. I think that's, there is a lot of power in vision boards, and using visual tools to manifest what you want in your future. And you don't really know how it's going to unfold, but often case it does unfold, because you're putting like more energy and intention onto something by making it visual, whether that's writing it down or doing a collage of photos or both. And I've just found that, like, that actually is the case. Like, I wrote these things down, many other things that have all come true. I remember writing down in one of my diaries that I wanted to live in London. And sure enough, I ended up living in London for 4 years in my mid 20s, you know.
I I couldn't agree more. And I think that over time, people have realized that we have been doing things unconsciously in terms of manifesting how we work our minds, you know, personally, professionally, as somebody who's for many years ago, high functioning athlete, is the visualization. I was manifesting without even realizing I was. You
Yeah.
see it, you believe it, you do it. And kind of on that note, so your tape art is very much supports your words that you're describing. So, which is what's behind me. And I said to you, you
And
know,
me.
and yours as well. And I remember saying to you, I want to create a platform on Who's Your Mama that shows that we can control our minds. It's a muscle. And for people to understand that they're not alone, and there's communities, whatever you identify. It's not a roller coaster, it's a train which you can control the speed. You didn't get off on the wrong track, you got off on a different one. So, what do you need in that moment in time? And then you created what's behind me, which looks very similar to what, in some ways, what you did, that incorporated that. And that is really fascinating to me, in terms of how you've taken the journey to understand yourself, creatively speaking, from where you decided you were at before and how you wanted to progress to here. So continue taking us on that journey.
Well, I think we need to rewind a little because, well, we haven't even gotten to the tape art part yet. I haven't even gotten to the photography part yet, or the graphic design part. I need to give you a little context to kind of explain to you and your audience how my creative life has evolved and how it all ties in together to where I am now. So I'll just give you a brief summary. Like I said, as a child, my dream was to be a fashion designer. Through my, formative years, teens into my 20s, um, my my journey was kind of all over the place. I was looking for, signs, but I finally did go to fashion design school in my early 20s. I was about 20. So I pursued a career in fashion. After design school at FIDM, I worked in the industry in LA for only a couple of years before I realized, oh, I hate this. This is not what I want. This is not what I signed up for. This is not what they taught me, meaning they did not teach me anything in that school about what I really needed to know in the real world, in the business. They didn't teach me the business. So
Which
I
was
quit.
specifically, because I'm sure people can relate to that. What do you
Okay,
mean?
well, I'm telling you, they didn't teach me the business skills that you need to be a functioning designer. I mean, I just thought designing was just going to be fun and creative and drawing all day long, but it wasn't. There's very little bit of it. So I got a little bit turned off by fashion pretty quickly and pivoted into graphic design. And that was based on basically just an accident. I moved to London. I needed a job. Somebody offered me a job doing graphic design. I was like, this looks interesting. This looks like fun. I love art and lines.
Yeah.
Make a note of that. And I started doing graphic design. Mind you, I was always doing photography in the background as a hobby. So I already had like a sense for composition. And I already had an affinity for design and color and shapes and art in general. So I ended up doing graphic design for maybe about 10 or 12 years. And in the background, I was always doing photography as a hobby. Well, so eventually I started to burn out on the graphic design because, it just, I don't know, ran its course for me after about 12 years. And this friend of mine basically encouraged me to pursue photography. He saw something in me, said, I think you'd be a great photographer here.
Can I
Why
just
don't
pause right there and ask you, at any point in that journey, still going back to my question that I asked you before, had you learned the business skills that you said that they didn't teach you in school?
No, I didn't know. I did not get to learn anything about business, meaning I never took any classes in it. I didn't really know what I was doing. So I was just winging it and doing whatever I needed to do. Um, and sorry about that. So, then I pursued a career in photography. I ended up in Paris after London, and again, more self-taught photography. I did take one course in Paris while I was there, and found that I loved photography more than anything. And I started doing commercial photography for years, and then eventually fine art photography, and did that for 10 or 12 years until I started to burn out again.
What do you think that, for people listening, what, from your perspective, what were the reasons why you burnt out in the
Okay,
areas you're
well,
at? Because obviously you
for
were
me
successful.
personally, for me personally, the burnout is from two things. One, I had a hard time sitting for a long time, like sitting at a chair at a computer doing graphic design and photography editing for long periods of time really was difficult for me. And I didn't really realize then why, because I have ADHD, and it's just really hard for me to sit that still and focus for a long time. I didn't realize that then, but that was a real struggle for me. And two was not really having the business background and knowing how to succeed financially in these businesses. That I was an entrepreneur running everything myself, and I just didn't have the business mind, the business background, and the foundation that I needed. So
And those are two
again,
areas that so many people, not just that are creative, but no doubt that aren't creative, can relate to. And that's why I wanted to make
of
sure I
course,
revisit
of
that,
course,
is the business. And then, like you said, ADHD is how that impacted why you moved on the way that you did and
absolutely,
why you were
yeah.
feeling.
Look, when you have ADD, you focus and you concentrate on the things you're interested in. And once you're no longer interested, it's like, see you later. And that's why I've also pivoted so many times and reinvented myself many times over again. There's nothing right and wrong about that. It is what it is. And I'm happy that I'm able to take a leap and reinvent myself whenever I want to. And let me just continue the story a little bit. So after I got more, frustrated with photography, and it was really just like I just couldn't sit that much anymore. It was killing my body. It was killing my mind. Um, but then, by total chance, I made a top that had a hood on it. It's something that I couldn't find in the stores, and I figured out how to make it. Like, you know what? I still have some tools from those days back in fashion design school 20 years ago. I still have a sewing machine. I bet I could figure out how to make this thing on my own, and I did. And before you knew it, everyone wanted one. And then all of a sudden, within a month or two, I had a whole collection. And there you go. I became a fashion designer 20 something years later, an actual fashion designer. And I just ran with it. And I realized, oh, I'm finally making something that makes sense to me, something that I can do for others, something that people want. I now can like remember all the lessons I had in actually making things in fashion school, but I still didn't know the business.
And
And it
I
was
think that's a
and going
really
back
good,
going into
yes.
fashion design business for myself after already running two businesses as an entrepreneur. This is now my third entrepreneurship business. That's when I really started to take it seriously and start to teach myself the business side of it.
And I think that's a really great place for us to stop before we go on to, I think there's going to be part 2 and 3 to this, because starting there with business and how you grew it out and understood through time that here are the areas that I need to understand more about to take control in a different way of
Yeah.
what I want for what I say I
Well,
want.
I think it's really important for your listeners to know that it's great to be creative. It's great to have a creative career, but learn business and finance as well. Know how to manage your money. Know how to figure out, the maybe not so fun side, but you need to know it. You need to know the business. And this is where I'm at now. Like I'm done with fashion too, and I've now gone into the art world, exactly where I've always wanted to be as an artist. Like you mentioned before, the tape art. This is what I do. I do
Yes.
murals and installations using tape as my medium, and I now have a much more um, of groundwork for my business side of it and how to make this a lucrative career.
Well, I think kind of like the tape art in the background, we just went up the triangle, the pyramid, the line, and the next is going to be part two, and we'll get to the end. But this isn't the end of going on the journey with you. Thank you so much for being on here. I have no doubt, just like your tape art and so many other things, you are going to inspire people and open up doors for them to understand that the time is now and you're your own advocate in life. So thank you so much for being on here. So
You're
we look
welcome.
forward to
Thank
having you
you.
again. Let's go, y'all. The time is now. Thank you for tuning into Who's Your Mama? And I look forward to collaborating from a community standpoint for the next episodes.